The titans of old are awakening once again, ready to reclaim their place in a world that has grown cold and mechanical. Witness the epic scale of our latest series, where legends return to the light of day. Click subscribe now and be there for the return.
My landlord showed up at my door at 2 in the morning, not knocking, pounding. The kind of sound that yanks you out of sleep and makes your heart slam before your brain even catches up with what's happening. I sat up in bed, completely disoriented. My phone said 2:14 a.m. I'd been asleep for maybe 3 hours. I'd had a long shift. I work as a pharmacy technician at a hospital, and Tuesdays are brutal. I'd come home, eaten half a bowl of cereal over the sink, and collapsed. The pounding came again. I grabbed my robe off the hook behind the door and walked down the short hallway of my apartment. Through the peephole, I could see Mr. Delacroix, my landlord, standing in the fluorescent light of the corridor. He's in his late 60s, heavy set, with a white beard he keeps neatly trimmed. In the 4 years I'd lived in that building, I had never once seen him outside during daylight hours, let alone at 2 a.m. He handled everything through voicemail and a management app. I cracked the door with the chain still on. Mr. Delacroix? He looked like he hadn't slept either. His jacket was on over what looked like pajama pants. His eyes were doing something I couldn't quite name. Not panicked exactly, but urgent. The way someone looks when they're trying very hard to stay calm. I need you to pack a bag, he said. Don't go to work tomorrow. Don't go anywhere until you hear from me. I stared at him. What? I know how this sounds. He lowered his voice, even though the hallway was empty. I can't explain everything right now, but you need to trust me. Pack what you need for 2 days, and don't open this door for anyone until I contact you. Mr. Delacroix, it's 2 in the morning. I know what time it is. He said it gently, not impatiently. That's what stopped me. He didn't look crazy. He looked scared. Please, I'll explain everything, but right now I need you to do this. He held my gaze for a moment, then turned and walked back toward the stairwell. I stood there with my hand on the door chain for a long time. I should tell you about where I was in my life at that point, because it matters. I was 38 years old, recently separated, living alone for the first time in 11 years. My daughter, who was 16, lived primarily with her father across town. We had a schedule. She stayed with me every other week and every other weekend. The week Mr. Delacroix knocked on my door, she was with her dad. The separation had been my idea, technically. My ex-husband, Garrett. I'd almost written my husband and then caught myself. Which tells you something about where my head was. Garrett and I had been growing in different directions for years. There was no dramatic event. No affair, no blow-up, no moment of clarity. Just a slow erosion. By the time I filed the paperwork, it felt less like a decision, and more like an acknowledgement of something that had already been true for a long time. I'd moved into the Hargrove building. That's what everyone called it. After the family that owned it before the Delacroix. About 8 months after we separated. It was a clean, quiet building on the east side. My apartment was on the 4th floor. 2 bedrooms, one for me and one for my daughter on her weeks. The rent was higher than I wanted. But Mr. Delacroix had been flexible about the first and last month, and he'd fixed the dishwasher within 48 hours of me reporting it. Which in my experience is nearly unheard of. I didn't know much about him personally. I knew he had a son who sometimes helped with maintenance. I knew he lived in the building, Unit 1011, ground floor. I knew he'd owned the building for about 20 years. That was it. I had no idea why he would show up at my door at 2 a.m. with that look on his face. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep. By 7 the next morning, I had texted my supervisor at the hospital and told her I was having a family emergency and wouldn't be in. She wasn't thrilled. We were already short-staffed, but she told me to keep her updated. I made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table. I looked at my phone. Nothing from Mr. Delacroix. I was halfway through my second cup when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. The voice on the other end was professional, female. She identified herself as an investigator with the Ohio State Board of Pharmacy. Is this Willa Navarro? Yes, I said slowly. Mrs. Navarro, I'm calling regarding an ongoing investigation. We have some questions about your employment at Wentworth Memorial Hospital. Are you available to speak? I set down my coffee cup. What kind of investigation? There was a brief pause. We've received a complaint regarding prescription irregularities in the pharmacy department. Your name has come up in the course of our inquiry. The floor dropped out from under me. My name, I repeated. Yes. I want to be clear that you are not currently under formal investigation. We're conducting preliminary interviews. But I do want to speak with you before you go in to work today, if possible. I told her I wasn't going in today. She asked if I could come to their offices. I said I'd call her back. I sat very still for a long time. Then I called Mr. Delacroix. He answered on the second ring, which told me he'd been waiting. Come down to my apartment, he said. Use the stairs. Don't stop to talk to anyone. His apartment was neat in a way that surprised me. I don't know what I expected. Plants everywhere. Framed photographs. A large wooden table covered in papers and folders. A laptop open in the middle of it all. His wife, I knew, had passed away several years ago. He lived alone. He poured me coffee without asking and sat down across from me. I need you to understand, he said, that what I'm about to tell you is going to sound strange, and I need you to hear all of it before you react. Okay, I said, even though my hands were already unsteady. He told me that about 3 weeks ago, he'd had a conversation with his son, who works in building maintenance, but also does occasional contract work for a security firm. His son had been doing a job, he wouldn't tell me for whom, and had come across something. Documents. Financial records. Records that had been altered. The records were from Wentworth Memorial's pharmacy department, and my name was on them, not as a perpetrator. As a scapegoat, Mr. Delacroix slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed pages, spreadsheets, email chains, a few internal memos. I'm not going to pretend I understood all of it immediately, but I could see my name, and I could see, even without legal training, that someone had attached my employee ID to a series of transactions I had nothing to do with. Who did this? My voice came out strange, flat. We don't know the full picture yet, he said. What my son discovered is that there are at least 2 other people involved. Both of them in administrative positions above you. He thinks this has been going on for about 18 months. 18 months. I'd been at Wentworth for 3 years. Whoever had done this had had plenty of time to build their case, to weave my name through enough documentation that it would look, at first glance, like a pattern. The board called me this morning, I said. He nodded like he'd expected this. They were going to. Someone filed the complaint recently. Probably to get ahead of this before it unraveled another way. If you go in there today, without knowing what they know, without legal representation, I could walk into something I can't walk back out of. Yes. I looked down at the papers in front of me. My name, over and over. Dates I remembered. Quantities that weren't right. Authorization codes I'd never entered. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why didn't your son go to the authorities himself? Why come to me first? Mr. Delacroix was quiet for a moment. Because the person who altered those records, the primary one, is someone with connections to this building. To the property management company I answer to. My son came to me because he was afraid of what would happen to both of us if we went forward the wrong way. He paused. And I came to you because you needed to know. You have a daughter. You have a career. I wasn't going to let you walk into that hospital not knowing what was waiting for you. I didn't say anything for a long time. Outside his window, the morning was gray and ordinary. A garbage truck moved down the street. Someone's dog barked twice and then stopped. What do I do? I finally asked. He pulled a business card from the stack of papers and pushed it toward me. This is an attorney. She specializes in pharmaceutical law and employment cases. My son has already spoken with her. She's expecting your call. I picked up the card. The name on it was Sylvie Marchetti. I held it between my fingers like it was something fragile. I called Sylvie Marchetti from my car, parked in the building's lot, because I didn't want to be in my apartment. I don't know why. It just felt like I needed to be somewhere I could move if I had to. She answered herself, no receptionist. She sounded like someone who had been awake for a while. Willa, she said, before I could introduce myself. I've been waiting. Tell me what the board said. She listened without interrupting as I walked her through the call. When I finished, she was quiet for about 5 seconds. Don't call them back today, she said. Don't go into work. Don't discuss this with any coworker, supervisor, or anyone affiliated with Wentworth. Not even to say you're sick. My supervisor already knows I'm not coming in. That's fine. What reason did you give? Family emergency. Good. Keep it there? She paused. I've looked at the materials Delacroix's son provided. I want to be careful about how I characterize what I've seen until I have more. But what I can tell you is this. The documentation is inconsistent. There are metadata discrepancies. The timestamps on several of the altered entries don't align with your logged shift hours. So it can be disproved. Not immediately, and not without a fight. But yes, I believe it can be. Another pause. What I'm more concerned about right now is who filed the board complaint and why they filed it now. That timing is not accidental. I asked her what she thought was happening. She took a moment before answering. I think someone knew that a separate investigation was getting close to this department. I think they filed the complaint against you as a preemptive move. To redirect attention, create a competing narrative, and potentially get ahead of any whistleblower protections you might have claimed. I didn't know anything to blow the whistle on. I know. That's actually what makes you useful to them as a target. You're credible. You've been there long enough. You have access to the systems they used. And you had no obvious motive to expose them. Your name fit. I leaned my forehead against the steering wheel. They picked me, I said. Because I was convenient. Yes, she said. Not cruelly, just honestly. But they also made mistakes, and that's what we're going to work with. The next 48 hours were the strangest of my life. I didn't go to work. I didn't go anywhere really. I stayed in my apartment mostly, with the door locked and my phone nearby. My daughter called on the second evening, and I talked to her for almost an hour about nothing. School. A movie she'd watched, a friend's drama that she relayed to me in exhaustive detail. I didn't tell her anything. I didn't want to. She's 16 and she'd been through enough with the divorce. I wasn't going to put this on her until I knew what this was. Mr. Delacroix checked on me twice. Once he brought soup. Actual soup, from scratch in a container with a lid. I ate it at my kitchen table and felt, for the first time since all of this started, something close to steadiness. On the morning of the third day, Sylvie called me. I need you to come to my office, she said. Today, I have something to show you. Her office was downtown, on the 14th floor of a building I'd walked past 100 times without ever going into. The lobby smelled like recycled air and carpet cleaner. I took the elevator up and found her office at the end of a hallway. Glass door. Her name in simple black letters. She was already standing when I came in. Across from her desk were two other people. A man in his 40s who she introduced as a federal compliance investigator, and a younger woman who was, apparently, an attorney from the state attorney general's office. I sat down and looked at all three of them. They've been investigating Wentworth's pharmaceutical procurement for 8 months, Sylvie said, separately from the board complaint. They came to me yesterday because my inquiries flagged in their system. The compliance investigator leaned forward. He had the kind of face that doesn't give much away. Miss Navarro, we want to be direct with you. The evidence we have gathered points to a scheme involving diversion of controlled substances and the falsification of dispensing records. 2 individuals in administrative positions at Wentworth appear to be at the center of it. I know, I said. Someone put my name on it. Yes. He didn't flinch. We saw that. That's part of why we're here. The complaint to the board was filed by one of the individuals we've been monitoring. We believe it was an attempt to muddy the investigation. And me? My voice was steadier than I expected. You're not a target of our investigation, the woman from the AG's office said. You are potentially a witness. And we'd like to talk to you about what you may have observed in that department over the past 18 months. Even things that didn't seem significant at the time. I thought about that for a moment. About the small things I'd noticed and brushed aside. The discrepancies that had been explained away. The sense, which I'd never been able to put a name to, that certain things in the department ran on a logic I didn't quite have access to. Okay, I said. I'll tell you everything I remember. It took 3 separate sessions over the following 2 weeks to get through it all. Everything I'd noticed. Every time something hadn't quite added up and I'd let it go. Because I didn't want to seem like someone who made trouble. Every small, ordinary moment that turned out to matter. At the end of the second session, the compliance investigator paused before closing his laptop. You know, he said, a lot of people in your position would have gone in to work that day, would have talked to their supervisor, tried to get ahead of it on their own terms, maybe said something that complicated things considerably. I thought about Mr. Delacroix standing in that fluorescent hallway at 2 in the morning. About the look on his face. About the way he'd said, please, like he meant it. Someone warned me, I said. He nodded. Someone did. I was reinstated to my position at Wentworth 6 weeks later, after the board received a formal communication from the AG's office clearing my name. My supervisor called me personally, which I hadn't expected. She sounded genuinely relieved, which I also hadn't expected. The two individuals at the center of the scheme were placed on administrative leave, pending further proceedings. I won't say their names here because the legal process is still ongoing. And Sylvie has advised me to be careful. What I can say is that one of them had been with the hospital for over a decade. The other had started about 2 years before I did. Both of them had seemed, to me, like perfectly ordinary colleagues. That's the part that stays with me. Not the fear, not the paperwork, not even the feeling of my own name being used as a shield for someone else's crimes. What stays with me is how ordinary it all looked from the outside. Mr. Delacroix's son, his name is Thierry, was interviewed as part of the investigation. The connection to the property management company turned out to be more complicated than we'd initially understood. And there were aspects of that part of the story that I still don't fully know. What I know is that Thierry came forward when he didn't have to, and that his father came to my door in the middle of the night because of it. I brought Mr. Delacroix a bottle of wine the week I went back to work. He looked at it, then looked at me, then said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," I said. He invited me in and we sat at his kitchen table, the same one covered in papers, though the laptop was closed now, and talked for an hour about nothing much. His wife, my daughter, the building's aging water heater, which he was going to have replaced in the spring. Normal things, quiet things. When I got up to leave, I paused in the doorway. "Why did you trust me?" I asked. "You could have just handled it another way, stayed out of it." He considered this for a moment. "I've been a landlord for 20 years, he said. "You learn to read people, and the other thing is," he paused. "My wife would have told me not to get involved. She would have said it wasn't our business, and she would have been right in a practical sense." He looked at the framed photograph on the shelf near the door. A woman in her 50s, dark hair, laughing at something outside the frame, but she also would have done the same thing I did. She wouldn't have been able to help it. I thought about that the whole drive home. That's the thing about the people who quietly show up for you. They usually don't have a clean explanation for why. They just can't look the other way. They knock on your door at 2 a.m. and say trust me and mean it so plainly that somehow even half asleep and confused you do. My daughter came back for her week on a Sunday. I made her favorite dinner, chicken piccata, which takes longer than it should, and we sat at the table and ate together, and I told her some of it. Not all, just enough. She listened carefully, the way she does when something matters to her. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "So your landlord saved your whole career," she said. "Pretty much, yes." She thought about that. "That's kind of incredible." "It is," I said. She reached over and stole a piece of lemon off my plate, which she always does, and I let her, which I always do. We sat there in the kitchen for a while after the food was gone. Just talking. The way we used to before everything got complicated. And I thought about how close I had come to walking into that hospital that morning, going through the shift, answering questions, without knowing what the questions were really for. How close I had come to losing the thing I'd spent years building quietly, without fanfare, the only way I know how to do anything. And I thought about an old man in a hallway at 2 a.m., knocking on a door he didn't have to knock on, because he decided that someone else's life was worth the trouble. Some people are like that. You don't find them by looking. They just appear at the worst possible time, and they tell you not to go. And you don't know why, but something in you listens. I'm glad I listened.